Okay, welcome everybody to the Planetary Magic Principles course. I am Rufus Opus. I will be walking you through everything I know about this. This class is designed to provide you with a working knowledge of how planetary magic works. After this class, you should know enough about the principles of it to start learning the different aspects of working with the specific spirits. We won't get into the details of how to conjure specific spirits in today's class, but the rest of the lessons associated with this course will go into like the specific seals and names, any information I have about the actual spirits. But today you will learn all of the framework, the knowledge, the gotta try not to say the all the information that goes into making planetary magic work, all the theory, all the concepts, and sort of the background on where we get all of our information from and why we think the things that we do about how planetary magic works and why planetary magic versus all these other things. So yes. Okay. So we're going to get started with just a simple some simple definitions of what the what planetary magic is actually all about. So we'll pull up my notes here just so I can follow along. There we go. Okay, so yes, here we go. Yeah, sorry about all that. So we'll start with the definition. So planetary magic is basically just magic with the planets. It's just like every other kind of magic in that we are going to be referring specifically to conjurations and calling up the spirits, explaining what it is that we want them to do, waiting for them to give us advice back on that, and then releasing them to go and manifest things as we've requested, so that they bring back to us all of the materializations or changes in our personal spheres that we are looking for. The definition that we're working with here is conjuring spirits to change the natural world according to your desires. That's my old notes, actually. It should be conjuring spirits to quantifiably influence the natural world or qualitatively influence yourself in accordance with your desires. So the reason I added the part about qualitatively influencing yourself in accordance with your desires is because that aspect of magic is something that we're going to be talking about today. It's not just the materialization. I think materialization is a very key part of magic. And I think that's the first thing that we need to do is take care of our material world so that we have enough luxury, time, and peace of mind to focus on our spiritual studies. It's a very expensive hobby, and we need to actually have a job most of the time to support ourselves when we're doing this magical work. And taking care of ourselves financially first out of the gate is a great way to warm up with magic, to kind of practice and get good at it, and also to set yourself up so that you have the framework of everything you need. And if you start out with like just a better job ritual, just Jupiter bless me with a better job. It's a simple, easy, direct way to interact with the spirits, and it has a direct result on your well-being, so that you can start to have more time and more energy to devote to your spiritual practice. So we're going to be talking about the material changes that you can do. But in the definition, I also wanted to point out that we use this to qualitatively influence ourselves in accordance with our desires. So there's a whole other aspect to magic that is in the conjuration class. I kept it mostly about changes to the natural world and not about initiations and transformations of the spirit. But when we get into planetary magic, it's got to be a little bit different, because as I said in the conjuration class, when you conjure a spirit, it changes your personal energy in your sphere to be more closely aligned with that of the spirit. It's the principles of resonance. And when things are vibrating in the same room together and they're tuned somewhat close, they all start to vibrate. And in a similar way, the spirits change your vibrations to align with theirs. So you're going through this transformational process that makes you more closely aligned with the energies and the forces, or whatever you want to call it, of that planet. And they're pretty pure, they're pretty clean, and they're not really going to cause you a lot of damage or harm in the long run. There can be some trauma that gets shaken out as you start working with these spirits. It can trigger, like if you've got crap built up around a specific part of your life that's related to those planets, it can come out. But for the most part, it helps you. It gives you the energies and the powers that you need to deal with it along the way, in my experience. So it's not too dangerous or anything. It's not gonna, you won't be dead by dawn or anything like that. It's not like demon magic where if you have the wrong idea of what you're doing, you end up hurting yourself with silliness. But yeah, so that's why the definition is a little bit different, because with the planetary magic, there is a whole initiatory path that you can take that is all about, like the reason that we know that planetary magic works is because there's this cosmology that informs us of how ideas manifest and materialize and descend and all this stuff. And for that to be true, for the planetary magic to work, the rest of the lore that goes around that is also true, right? I mean, you can't just, I mean, you can pick and choose what you really want to believe if you really feel like being that kind of person. But in general, the systems that you can work with the entire system to draw the full power out of it. So if you work with a corpus hermeticum, for example, that empowers you or to do the magic because you're made in God's image, and you work with all these seven governors because they are your brothers and sisters, that approach gives you a path of initiation as well, right? And if you look at the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, it talks about going up through the heavens and then descending again in power. And that's another path of initiation. So the planetary magic specifically gets its lore from systems that encourage you to use it for personal transformation, ascending through the spheres, reuniting with the Godhead, and attaining universal consciousness, which we'll be talking about later today as part of the class. So the whole process is embedded in the planetary magic. So I wanted to expand the definition a little bit to include qualitative changes to ourselves that can be accomplished through this particular magic. So magic is basically just talking to invisible friends and making them asking them to make changes in this world and what we actually experience. Planetary magic specifically, it's just like it says on the label. You conjure the spirits that are related to the planets. So the planets themselves are Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, the Moon, and Mercury. I forgot Mercury there. They are the spheres that were, or the planets that were visible out in the deserts. The Persians and the people of the Middle East who wandered around for 40 years in the desert, they had lots of opportunities to look up at the night sky for tens of thousands of years. Not just the people of the Middle East, but our entire history of humanity has always looked at the stars, and we've put together a whole astrological science around it, and we've come to understand what it is. But these early astronomers, they couldn't actually see. They couldn't see all the planets. They could only see the seven that were moving around them, and they could see the patterns that were going on up in the night sky. And they deduced a certain order of the universe from that and everything. But they didn't, their system was reliant on what they could see with their eyes, and eventually the Arabs invented the telescopes, right? Lenses. Like they actually made amazing advances in optics. If you look at the Arabic texts on how lenses work, it's incredible. They understood things way before anybody else did. But their understanding of lenses and optics makes me think that they probably had telescopes, but they were able to see things better than we give them credit for, I think. But the actual astrology that we received in around by the time we get to the Middle Ages, most of the stuff I know about magic is hermetic. It's based on the 16th century compendium of information that Cornelius Agrippa put together, the 3 books of occult philosophy. A good 90% of what I believe about magic and what I do with magic resonates a lot with the 3 books of occult philosophy, because that book in the 16th century was put together. So Agrippa was 15 years old, and he wanders across Europe, and he gathers up all this information about all these magical practices, and he puts them together into this encyclopedia. And it is basically a survey of occult beliefs in the 16th century after Constantinople had fallen in 1400 or whatever, and then the Medicis had all the texts that were coming into the West from Constantinople after the mass refugees wandered over to Europe. The Medicis had all these texts translated in Italy, right? And then it got disseminated out throughout the rest of Europe. And all of a sudden, there was a revival of hermetic thought and a new understanding of hermetic principles. Agrippa went around and gathered all that up. And I guess you got to remember in the 13th century, there was the plague and the Black Death, and everything was pretty bleak, and there weren't a lot of people around. And then they got this influx of refugees from Constantinople and this new information about hermetics and all these philosophical things. And there was an occult revival that was going on really big around that time, because there were all these demons that had to be causing all these problems. There were all these spirits that had to be affecting things. There's a lot of chaos, and a lot of people, when people are going through chaos, what do? We ask for help from the gods. We turn to our invisible world. And if you look at the first through the third centuries in Rome, all of the Hecateon stuff, the PGM, the Chaldean oracles, those all came out of that swirl of the fall of Rome, right? The establishment of the Holy Roman Empire, the destruction of all the stuff that was going on, the invasions of all these heathens and pagans or whatever, the Visigoths and whatnot. So all this stuff was going on, and it was chaotic, and the magic just blew up, right? They had been exposed to one another under the Pax Romani. All these different cultures were right up against one another. They were vibing, they were sharing information, they were stealing each other's practices, they were appropriating one another's cultures, and they put it all together, and they came up with this incredible system of magic, right? So we have all of the Greek magical papyri, we have the methods of first through third century magic, fourth century magic that we've been digging up lately, and it's fascinating what they did with it. But that was going on in the 15th century too. When you get to the end of the 18th, 19th century, into the 19th century, we had the Golden Dawn people show up, and the British Empire and the Victorian realm. And if you look at what they did, it was a lot of cultural appropriation, but not in a good way. It was a lot of English people went out to other places in the world, and they saw the amazing, wonderful cultural things that they saw, and they told them what they meant. They took the images and they basically redesigned these whole systems of magic and spirituality around what they thought that it meant and what it should mean based on their understandings and their preconceived notions. So we end up with theosophy and New Thought and the Golden Dawn, and Thelema came out of the Golden Dawn. We've got the SRIC, I think it was, the Rosicrucian based different systems of initiation and magical practice. We've got a ton of stuff that all is very similar, and it miraculously all reflects this Rosicrucian thinking that was popular in Germany in the 1800s. It's amazing how much of that is reflected in what these 19th and 20th century magicians went out, found in these foreign cultures, and brought home and taught to everybody. I'm reading a Tantra book right now by somebody who I admire a great deal, but if you look at the history of this tantric lineage that he's explaining, it's basically we took this information and we played with it and manipulated it and changed it entirely. So now it doesn't look anything like it did originally, but it works great, and here's this wonderful system. And it's everything that you don't want to see being done with a tradition, right? It's like it's not, let me learn how to do this properly, let me understand how the system works. It's, let me hack this and put it together the way I think it should go. And it's like, okay, but it works. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's basically what they did in the 70s and 80s. They went over all this stuff from the early 1900s and hacked it, right? And that's what Crowley was doing. That's what Blavatsky was doing. Blavatsky, she went over there. They interviewed the people. They took their ideas of their beliefs and they brought it back to Europe, and they started something with it, right? That's what they did. It's cool. It's fine. It's just whatever, right? But these I forgot where I was going with that. Anyway, these systems of magic that we got out of all this stuff that was going on. Um, it's just wow, I totally forgot where I was trying to go with all that. But anyway, if you look back at the history of our hermetic thought, it does have that whole system of initiation and everything, and it will help you back up the tree of life, back up through the spheres, and back up to the places up through the sphere, so you can attain that unity with divinity there. So anyway, yes, the ability to receive these initiations and communicate with those spirits is where I think I was going with that. I'm sorry about that. I get off on these tangents sometimes. This is why I ended up with a 3-hour class last week. I will try to focus. Okay, so planetary magic then is magic that we do with the spirits of the planets, and we conjure them to do either material things or spiritual changes, transformations to ourselves that are empowering and effective. I remembered what I was saying. Okay, so the reason that I focus on the 16th century magic is because it was a condensation of all the knowledge prior to that 19th century appropriation complex, right? It wasn't like, let's go out and appropriate this stuff and reinterpret it based on our ideas. It was actually just, what do we think based on what we've studied and learned? What are we doing with it? How does it work? It's not, it was a bunch of refugees in the 15th century that were giving their information and working together to build a system. So what we get out of the 3 books of occult philosophy is a solid internally consistent system that reflects their understanding of hermetic principles of the time. What we get out of the 19th century is a bunch of rehashed, reinterpreted systems that basically have pieces and parts hammered together that don't necessarily belong together. So when you go back to the 16th century magic, what you get is something pure, cleaner, more harmonious, and less egregiously wrong. It's not based on Budge. It's not based on these Egyptian myths that we know are false and based. They were running entire magical orders on bad translations of Egyptian that they didn't understand. We have new translations of it. We know how wrong they were, and yet still places like the OTO, the Lima, the Golden Dawn, they still teach these things as if the original translations were correct. They still have the same pantheons that they put together, that they made up out of whole cloth, out of misunderstood bad Egyptian. They have whole systems that they still practice, and I don't understand why they do that, knowing that it's wrong. But if you want like something cleaner and more pure, it's easier to go back in time before this, what I consider the stream being clouded and muddied up with all of the misappropriation and misuse of traditions that happened in the early 20th century. So that's why we use the 16th century stuff for this class. It's very consistent. It's very pure. It's developed. So like all the stuff that came out of the 1st through the 3rd centuries in the Middle East and Rome, when Rome fell, all of that stuff went out into the wild, and it got to evolve. It grew, it became some other stuff. It went to cities, it learned things, it hung out with new people. It grew into a complete comprehensive system of hermetics, right? And that's what we can find in the 16th century, like 1300 years later. It's a much more cohesive system than it was at any other time, I think. So that's why I prefer the 3 books of occult philosophy. So again, everything that we're going to be talking about in this class, you could probably find in the 3 books of occult philosophy. I recommend Donald Tyson's version. A friend of mine, Edward Perdue, I don't know if we're really friends, but I like him. He did another translation of it recently. It's based off the original manuscripts. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. The Donald Tyson version, it's been completely functional for all my needs. It has great notes. I love the text. It's very useful. The other version that I've read a lot of is I think it's a Sam Taylor or something like that. It's or Francis Barrett, something from way back, before Beyond Ananda or whatever. It's not really great, but it's free and it's available on esotericarchives.com. That's the version that I probably have read the most of because it was free. And it's available on the internet, so I can search it whenever I need to. Definitely check it out. Esotericarchives.com, 3 books of occult philosophy. All the information that we're going to go over here is there in some form, and I will be referring to it as we go along. You should probably have a copy of it somewhere in your library. If you're, in my opinion, if you're consider yourself a magician of our tradition, then you should probably have this book, especially if you're going to do planetary magic. The planetary magic is part and parcel of what Agrippa teaches, and that's because the hermetic system is the system of manifestation that is based on, if you look at the Corpus Hermeticum, it talks about the mind of God, the source of all, the mind, the top of the food chain is this prime mover, and that entity is, I consider him Zeus based on the Derveni manuscript, but we can talk about that some other time. But from the source, the mind, the nous of all things, ideas are formed, and these ideas go down through the 7 spheres, and then they materialize in the elemental kingdom where we actually can experience it. This is called the chain of manifestation, and the chain of manifestation is just as you can see here, it just walks an idea through each of the spheres. The spheres in planetary magic, let me go back a second here. So each of the spheres represent a force that is applied to these ideas when they come down from the mind of God. In the realm of Saturn, it has the qualities of death, and occult wisdom is associated with Saturn. It's where an idea is given its fate. Fate is an idea that you get from Saturn, and it creates basically the end date, right? So when a thing is going to materialize in this material world, it's temporary. Everything here is going to go away. So when it passes through Saturn, it basically has a death date attached to it, right? It's got a moratorium or a mortuary date, whatever you want to consider it. Everything that comes into being leaves sooner or later. And Saturn is where that beginning and ending is applied, right? So that's the framework of what that idea is going to manifest as. And Jupiter then, right, it goes on from Saturn, it goes on to Jupiter. In the sphere of Jupiter, it receives all of its blessings and benefics. Jupiter represents all of the expansions. So like you can imagine Saturn being setting your borders of a thing, the terminals, the endings of things. That's Saturn. Jupiter then fills that up with all this beautiful blessings, right? It's like an outpouring. A lot of the imagery of Jupiter is a flood of good feeling, a flood of positive empowerment, a flood of beneficent resources or favor. It's this flood of joyful enjoyment and exuberance, right? And then it goes to Mars, right? And then in the realm of Mars, you get boundaries put around each of those things that are just sort of flooding all over and being great and good. Mars applies a little discipline to that, right? So Mars is the sphere of war and conflict, but it also is like the metal is iron. It provides strength. It's the thing that keeps the exuberance of youth from basically tearing apart your entire family. It's discipline, it's structure, it's the guardrails that keep you from falling off the path. And the sun, then it goes from like just getting this, like you've got this big circle, right, that's formed in Saturn. It gets filled up in Jupiter. Mars puts a little bit of order over it. And the sun, like those are all kind of the internal potentials of what this idea can be, right? It's got a lot of potential in those 3 spheres, but in the sun it starts to actually be projected, okay? And it also gets the spark of life. The sun was considered the phallus of Osiris. If you look at the myth of Osiris being slain and put back together, they couldn't find his phallus. It was floating in the sky. It was the sun. If you look at the story of Kronos, his phallus was also removed, or not Kronos, Uranus. Uranus is phallus was removed, it was also floating in the heavens as the sun. The sun was the generative principle, and today we know that the sun is a the sun is a massive incandescent gas, a gigantic nuclear inferno. So it's where hydrogen is converted into helium at a temperature of millions of degrees, right? So that's what we know about the sun today. But what we know about the light that we get from the sun is that the Earth would be a closed system without the sun. It is because of the sun that we have life. Energy is brought into our sphere, we would be subject to the laws of entropy otherwise, and we would just collapse and die because we don't have any energy coming into us from outside. But the sun keeps us alive. It provides warmth to keep us from turning into a snowball in space. It provides light that gets turned into trees, grass. It gets turned into everything that we enjoy on life. It's everything that allows life to be possible comes from the sun. So the sun is that creative, noble, life-giving force. It's represented by lions. It's represented by anything that's expansive and rules a lot and is very noble and proud. If you know any Leos, they are very typically like the sun. They're very big and bold and bright, and bright meaning like shiny, not necessarily the brightest or whatever, but they're just very out there with their expression of themselves. So you can think of the sun as being the sphere of expression and the generative principles that force life into an otherwise not happening thing. So the idea has descended down to the sun. It goes on to Venus. Venus is considered the sphere of love and sex. In the Seven Spheres class, book, I talk about how it's the sphere of productivity. It's basically production, reproduction, and production. The generative forces are captured into the womb of Venus, and it's life is actually given a chance to blossom. But Venus is also more just about the sexual act and attraction and love, also hearth and home. It's about the whole emotional stuff that goes around sex and around all of the dramas that we have in our lives when we get together with people. There's always sooner or later there's something that happens. All of that stuff I'm going to say Venusian. The proper term is venereal, under Venus and having to do with Venus, but it sounds like a disease because of the way we think of things. But Venus is the sphere that handles love and sex, relationships, hearth and home, and all the emotional aspects of creating and maintaining a life or a family or a social existence here on the earth. Mercury, that goes over to Mercury. Mercury gets this all the production stuff, all the reproduction stuff from Venus. Mercury gets it and applies all these words, the ways that this idea is going to communicate itself, the ability, the symbols that are associated with this idea, how this idea is actually going to be able to communicate itself to other people. So like the sun is about expressing the idea, but Mercury is about communicating it, right? So it's not just the force of getting the idea out there, it's actually being able to be understood. And that's what Mercury provides. Thoth is associated with Mercury. He's the god of writing. One of the things that we learn as hermetic magicians is that we speak the universe into being. We use our words. Hermetic magicians are mercurial magicians. We're all up in our heads about things, and we use our words a lot. And the moon is the last sphere that idea goes through before it actually materializes, and that rules like the outermost form of things, the leaves of a plant, the shape of the leaves of the plant, the tone of your skin, not just the color of it, but like the tone, the very outer layer of everything. The last thing that gets applied to a thing is in the moon. So because it rules over the final image of things, it's the realm of deception and what's it called? The thing that you do when you try to bamboozle someone. Glamour magic is from the moon. Anything that has to do with the astral realm, like it's the sphere right above the material world. So like where the Akashic records are stored is all in the astral realm, and that's in the realm of the moon, according to the planetary spheres. So the moon represents the nebulous forces of waxing and waning. I said earlier that everything that comes into being has a death date. Everything is temporary. Everything also grows into manifestation, reaches its apex, and then declines. So it's not just within a lifetime. You start, you're 100% there, and then you go at 100%, and then you die at 100%. It's you start at 0, you slowly accumulate up to around 95, 98. You might make it to 100%, and then you start to decline. And that's just how it goes. That's life on Earth, and everything follows that path. And thinking that it doesn't causes a lot of people a lot of problems, and thinking that it's bad causes a lot of people a lot of problems. We'll talk a little bit more about why it's not a problem here in just a minute, but especially for people doing planetary magic, this whole thing is it's not as frightening as people think, or as permanent, or as I don't know. As you start creating reality with these forces, you worry less and less about your own temporary aspects, because you get more and more plugged into the rest of it, and you understand sort of how it all works, and where you fit into it. And this whole idea that we have of death and dying it's a ridiculous concept, because nothing ever stops. And you can say that, but you don't really understand it until you have like more of a framework to process it. And that's something that that the seven spheres magic actually can provide you with. So yeah, so the basic concept of the chain of manifestation is an idea, gets passed through the seven spheres, and it acquires one of these qualities of life, and some proportion to one another. So like you might have like 10% Jupiter, 40% Mars, whatever other percentages are left to make up 100% of what you are. But the different things that we experience are just different proportions of those things, and everything we experience is made out of these powers. And everything, it's like the table of elements, right? And basically the table of elements is what this was for up until whenever we started figuring out that this wasn't exactly accurate. We can't actually test for Jupiter and get a Jupiter reading on a device. It doesn't work that way. This is the spiritual principles that we're talking about. But in the way that the elemental table, the table of elements, shows all the different things that can be combined in different proportions to create Coca-Cola, for example, or a 7-Up. Very similar chemicals go into those things. Minor differences make one thing and one something else. In the same way, everything that combines in these seven spheres and these chain of manifestation, the proportions of these things determine what types of people we are, what types of experiences we have. Are we going to have a martial life where we fight for everything? Are we going to have a Jupiterian life where everything is beneficial and goes our way, or is it going to be all Mars or Saturn, or is one bad luck thing after the other? What's going to rule the theme of our life? These things are imprinted at our birth. Like we'll talk about that in a minute with astrology and all that stuff. But yeah, so it passes through the seven spheres. You get a little bit of a quality of each of them until you have basically what you're supposed to look like. And then you get passed over to the four elemental kings, earth, air, fire, water, in the proper order as it descends from top to bottom. It would be fire, air, water, and then earth. But whatever. Those four elements combine to give you your physical body. And if you look at the qualities of the elements, which we will do probably as we go along. Actually, no, I don't have an element. If I ever do an elemental class, we'll look at the qualities of the elements. But they're basically like cold and wet, or hot and dry, or whatever. And if you look around, it's basically the temperature and hardness and all those principles of existence. And the theory is that in the same way that the proportions of the planets are applied, the proportions of the elements are applied to actually get yeah, sorry, Chris, I do go on tangents. But yeah, anyway, so the elemental forces provide the proper proportions of what we need to materialize things in our life. So at that point, we have the material world and ourself in it. So as we know, those are just the seven regular planets. The other planets, there are definitely other planets. The reason I'm including this slide, honestly, is just because I want to key in on the fact that it's not science. What we're doing here is magic. what we're doing here is philosophical. It's not the same thing. These Trans-Saturnian planets, there are people who have put together spirit names and seals for Neptune and Uranus and friggin' Pluto, which isn't a planet anymore, according to Neil whatever. But this idea that these spirits names and seals exist, if you're interested in looking into it, by all means do. Right, I mean, Kenneth Grant and the Typhonian OTO are what you get when you do Trans-Saturnian planet, when you look into that kind of thing, the Ogdoadic, the stuff that you could see in what was the movie? Hellboy. Hellboy is actually based on stuff that you can that people run into when they get into these Trans-Saturnian planets. There's a lot of modern astrology that explains what the forces of these planets are, that provides you with the same kind of lore that I'm used to getting out of the hermetic traditions from the 16th, 17th century. You get the same kind of lore about these modernly discovered planets, but it's not as old. And I'm just kind of a curmudgeon about things, and I don't believe it because it's not old enough yet. But that's not really a valid approach to anything that we actually expect to happen and find value in. It can impact our life, and it can become a tool that we can use to manipulate our reality. I've cut myself off from those other three planets because I have a very simple mind. I don't do well with this much complexity. I started out in conjure magic with the intent of learning Enochian, and it's just too hard. It's too many spirits. The Ophanim have too many spirits. It's the wheels, right? Wheels within the wheels. Way too many heavens, too many choirs, too many rules, and too many specifications. I can handle 7 archangels and 4 elementals and the 12 of the sphere of the zodiac, and within the 7, each of the 7 have 4 spirits in the material world according to the system I work with. And I can work with that number. It's manageable. It's not the hundreds and hundreds and millions of possible permutations you can get from an Enochian tablet. It's just simple enough for someone like me. And it's the foundation of Enochian magic, right? So if you look at how Enochian magic works, the first thing they made him do is come up with a silver-lined book with 49 pages, right? And this is where you record all of your transmissions from your Enochian spirits. It's because they're a planetary system too. If you look at the Sigillum de Ameth, the SDA that John Dee created, it's a heptarchical magic. It's based on the 7 spheres again, right? And the whole table, the great table that you can create out of Enochian letters, it's all planetary. The whole thing, it's still related to the number 7, and it's complicated. It's 7 squared. It gets harder and harder the more you add to things, in my opinion. But you also get more and more nuance. You get more and more levers, more and more bells and whistles. It's not my intent to teach that because I don't understand it. I think that from what I provide in this course, it's enough for you to be able to effectively work wonders in this amazing little world that we live in. I enjoy it quite a bit, but it's not the high level detail stuff that you can get from more advanced magics. And that's why these courses are $25 each and not $125 each. But that's cool. You don't really need all that extra stuff, in my opinion. It's entirely about just effectively getting your information out there. Frater Ashen Hashan, a good friend of mine, I guess. He and I have been talking for years, and he is really great at everything he does. He takes meticulous time to figure out what it's supposed to look like and do it right. His interpretation of the Trithemian system of magic is awesome. He's got all the tools built according to the specs from other grimoires that were around at the same time. He's used information from other sources to inform what it must have looked like, and he tracked the Trithemian grimoire back down to its sources and put together a table and all this it's this gold sphere holder that he puts a crystal ball in, and he sells these kits if you want something that's like that. But it's a lot of work, and it's complicated. And when I read the book and I read the right, I walked away and I was like, oh, I could just draw a circle with a triangle in it and go to town. I'm good to go. And I tried it and it worked, and it was super effective. The system of magic that I teach and practice is super effective, and it's very simple. So it's something that even I can do. It's not the deep details that you get from other people trying to teach this stuff, but it's effective and it's empowering. So yeah, the system works fine without these other planets, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The 7 spirits are sufficient. If you look at the astrological influence of these planets, the further away a planet is, the less influence it has. So Saturn can be retrograde and it's not that big of a deal, but Mercury is retrograde, and because it's so fast and it manages all the forces of communication at the center of the solar system, it's going to have more of an impact on your life when it radically changes its direction, as it seems, from the Earth. But Saturn, because it's so slow and it takes so long, it's going to be retrograde for like however many months or years or whatever, it has less of an impact. They consider the slower planets to have less impact and the greater planets to have more impact, more immediate impact on us. So these 3 planets, Neptune and Uranus and Pluto, are so far away that if they have any powers, chances are it's negligible anyway, in my opinion. So if you really want some justification to kind of throw out those babies with the bathwater, there's that. But you don't have to do that. By all means, incorporate it into your personal practice, but it's effective without it. So what makes planetary magic different than other magic? So planetary magic is, not non-planetary magic is just conjuring any spirit to affect change in your life, right? And it can be the spirits of land, the genius loci, the gods of the pantheon of Greece, the gods of the pantheon of whatever, whatever system you want to work with. They can be demons, they can be angels, they can be whatever, but if they aren't one of the intelligences or spirits that are associated with a planet directly, then they might have planetary correspondences, but they are not planetary spirits. And what makes it different is that basically planetary is just a way of classifying things, right? It's not necessarily eventually we do have the entities themselves, so I can't say it's not the entities, but like Aries, like in the book I talk about how Aries, or not the book, the booklet workbook, Aries is the god of war, and a ritual where you're conjuring the god of war Aries is a ritual that can be considered martial, because Mars is a quality. It's not necessarily a god, but Aries is not the quality of Mars. Aries is the quality of Mars plus all the other spheres that were necessary for the idea of Aries to materialize as Aries in this material world. Shiva is a set of different combinations of those forces, and so he comes across as something that has some warlike properties sometimes under some conditions, if I understand him right, and not others, right? Rahu or Kuit has Egyptian aspects of or Crowley's idea of what Egyptian aspects of the war god were going to look like. Aries looks like a Greek god. He has all these Greek god things going on for him, but Mars is this Roman god, and he's got more of a legalistic spin on things. And like all the Roman gods, he's more officious and less personable, I think is the right way to put it. More businesslike and more. Anyway, he just has a different feel to him than Aries, even though they're supposed to be the same god. And the reasons that all these gods are different, even though they're all representations of, or can be seen as a representation of, a martial force, is because they do have all those other forces of the planets involved to make them who they are, and so they can do their jobs here in the material world. All of them have planetary correspondences, right? But all planets don't belong to necessarily just one god. So that's what separates planetary magic. But what really makes, okay, so when we do planetary magic, that's why non-planetary magic isn't planetary. But the way planetary magic works is we're conjuring up the actual intelligences that build our freaking lives, right? So this isn't just Ares who is like, oh, I'm the god of war and I have all these opinions and thoughts about how these things work. It's just the raw forces of Mars, right? And it's like, okay, and so you call Madimiel. Madimiel is, if you look in Hebrew, Madim is the Hebrew word for Mars. It's just the word for Mars, and Madimiel is like Marsiel. It's like god of this planet El or whatever, right? It's just a name for Mars, right? So Madimiel is the archangel of Mars and the essence of the planetary force of Mars. And when you work with him, he'll do whatever you ask. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't ask you why you want to do things. He doesn't ask if it's just, even though justice is of Mars, right? It's not. Justice is projection from human beings, has nothing to do with existence or the natural forces of life. It's not a just universe that we live in. It's just justice itself is not even equal or blind. It is just a concept that we project onto the universe to demand equality when the universe is not an equal place. I mean, it should be equal in terms of opportunity and potential for all human beings. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a lion is not equipped with the same things that an otter is equipped with. It's different and it's not fair and it's not just. There's no justice in nature. The natural world, a black hole doesn't have to prove its right to absorb a star, right? Gravity doesn't have to have a just cause to hold you sucked to this freaking planet surface. It doesn't have to do that. There's no justice, right? So don't think of it like that. But like the planet itself is the martial force. It's the force that manifests as war, that manifests as guardrails, that manifests as self-discipline. It manifests as willpower, the ability to stop from overeating when you're trying to lose weight, right? These are all martial qualities. So when you go to Mars and you say, I need some Mars power, Madimiel, send me some Mars power into my life at my diet so that I don't fail to stick to my diet plan, help me overcome this hunger and steak on my diet. And this is lame, I get it, but Madimiel will gladly do that for you, and he's just as likely to do that as if you say, Madimiel, stop the war in Ukraine, go let all the Ukrainian war fighters on either side of this war, let them all go back to Venus and find peace in her loving arms and go to sleep and rest, like it says in the Orphic hymn. You can ask him to do that, and Madimiel will send the forces of Mars that are related to peace to bear on the situation. You'll notice that the war in Ukraine didn't stop, even though I have asked for peace in that area. Sometimes the magic works and sometimes it doesn't. These planetary forces, they thrust this power that they represent into your sphere. They direct it the way you tell them to. Your words help shape the power, help shape the intention of what they're doing. Your actions give the powers a way to manifest. But if your request that you're submitting to the spirits doesn't have a chance to basically, like everything that we say in the idea world or in the word world or the symbol world or the magical world, these things that we're creating in the unseen world need something to hook onto in the material world for them to manifest. And if it's not there, it has to form. And if it's going to take a while to form, it's going to take a while for you to get what you want. The more you can direct things that are close to already existing or that are intended to augment things that already exist instead of creating something from scratch, the more likely your magic is going to work more quickly. So like I can do magic for peace in Ukraine, and the things that are necessary to bring peace will begin to happen. But the closer they were to peace, the faster the energies that I've released would be able to be effective on the situation, if that makes sense. So the planetary magic that we do, the forces that we conjure, it's less human, more structural. it doesn't care as much about what its impact is, but it's more powerful, right? It relies more on what you have in mind than what a god might know, who knows better than you, or a spirit who is like a tutelary spirit will help shape the energies. And if you ask a tutelary spirit to, like your holy guardian angel, you say, help me get rich over here and have $4,000, right? Your tutelary spirit is like, okay, this is I know how you are. You need to do this, this, and this so that you can build this in your life, and we can make this happen in a way that doesn't cause you a lot of stress or damage or harm or anything. But if you go right over to Tzadkiel of Jupiter, Tzedek is the Hebrew name for Jupiter. Tzadkiel is the intelligence of Jupiter. If you go to him and you say, make me rich, give me $4,000, he's like, okay, here's $4,000. And it'll pour out into your sphere. It'll grab the first thing that it can to manifest on, and it'll provide you with that chunk of change. I went through Bune and asked for $4,000 once, and I ended up with my house catching on fire, right? And my first check was for the money I needed. It was great in terms of success, but terrible in terms of effect, right? So the planetary forces are less personable and more willing to just do whatever you ask, and without asking questions and without caring about the consequences on you personally. At least that's been my experience with it. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. They don't do anything that's going to kill you. They don't, and there's nothing that you can do with magic that you can't undo with magic. In my opinion, I've never screwed myself up so badly that I haven't been able to fix it using the same powers that I called on. And if I've called on a spirit that is doing something that I don't like, the nice thing about being a magician is I can call on the same spirit and tell it to stop. And in the same way that it started when I asked, it will stop when I asked. That's how the magic works. There's nothing that we can do with magic that can't be undone with magic. It's magic. It's great. So that's sort of the difference of planetary magic and non-planetary magic. So now the next section we're going to talk about is planetary magic and astrology. So when you look at where the planets are on a zodiacal chart, it tells you how those qualities of life are going to manifest. So if you look at Venus in Capricorn, that's what this image is. It's I can't really talk much. At the end of the class, if you have more questions about Bune, I'm happy to get into it then. But let's try to focus on the planetary stuff for now. I probably could do a Goetic class at some point. Probably should. I've got a Goetic book out there, but at this point, I don't have. Let's try to focus on the material at hand. Right. Okay. So planets and astrology. This image is Venus in Capricorn, and you can see that the Venusian powers are being reflected through a Capricorn lens. And that's basically what it looks like when you look at a astrological chart. You can tell what flavor the planet's energy is going to come through based on what sign it's in. If the sign it's in is like if Mars is in Aries, Mars rules Aries. It's a very powerful thing. Mars is going to be very powerful in that person's life. They're going to be very active. They could be very militaristic. They could be very warlike. They would be great at strategy. They could be great as a CEO or anything in our modern world that requires fighting for resources. Trying to get more resources for your tribe from somebody else's tribe. That's what Mars is about. And Mars and Aries would be very good at that. Mars and Cancer is a water sign. It's not nearly as strong. It's going to be buried. It's not going to have the ability to express itself, but it's going to be deeply buried inside this shell of a crustacean with these terrible claws out there. And it's going to be very, very, all of the warlike nature, the anger, the wrath, the frustration, it's all going to be buried and very passive aggressive if someone's Mars is in Cancer, for example, if it's a person that you're looking at. If it's an event, it would be applied differently. But in astrology, you can tell how the planets are going to manifest based on what sign it's in, is what I'm trying to say. You can learn a lot about the magical qualities of the planets from how they impact events astrology. So in astrology, astrologically, in astrology. So yes. So what that means is you can actually, like, in each of the 7 spheres classes that are coming up, I'm going to go over the details and the properties of the planet itself. It's going to have all the different qualities, and it's going to kind of give you a framework of information that you can use to get started changing your world with different kinds of magic, right? But those classes aren't going to be enough. They're hopefully I'm already at an hour, but probably have another hour left to go today. But the classes aren't really going to cover everything that you need to know about the spirits, and they're going to keep telling you more about themselves as you work with them. They're going to keep informing you of what they're up to. And when you start looking at astrology, and if you get into the process of creating charts and reading and identifying charts, you start to learn more and more about what the planetary forces are and how they can manifest in your material world. It gives you more switches, more bells, more whistles, more knobs, more control to fine-tune your results as you learn more about this stuff. In the conjuration class, I stressed so much about how your cosmology informs your practice. The more you learn about this, the more your experiences with these spirits are going to change. Joseph says, how do you undo exactly the same? How can you undo the type of spell that you've created using planetary magic? So to undo a spell, like for me, if you've done a spell in Saturn and you need to undo that spell, conjure the same spirits that you use to get it started and ask them to stop their efforts. It's a direct ask them specifically to please stop. Please don't do that anymore. And the conjuration rite, it takes about 15 minutes. You just call the spirit by their name and their seal. If they're already messing with you in your life, chances are you've already talked to them, and they aren't very far away. So getting them to quit what they're doing is pretty easy, especially if it's something that you started yourself. If you're trying to end other people's spells that they've sent against you, the sixth pinnacle of Mars is ideal for that. It has 4 spirits that you can attached to it that will defend you and return all the spells and scourges of God that are sent against you from other people back to their source, and it'll afflict them instead. It's very key, I think, to my personal practice. Highly recommend. Okay, so yeah. There's a kind of magic that is specifically called astrological magic. Planetary magic is about conjuring these spirits and entities to materialize things and change things in your material world or your spiritual existence and your intellectual understanding of things. It's active. You're calling on the spirits, you're directing them, or you're asking them to direct their forces on your behalf. You're actively participating in the creation of your world. And you're taking a role of the leader. Hermes Agator is the epithet of Hermes, that is the leader. Agator, you're becoming the leader, the director of the forces at hand. It's active magic. Astrological magic is based on timing and elections. So like Christopher Warnock is a great magician. He teaches a wonderful class, a lot of classes actually, on Renaissance magic. And I've learned a ton of stuff from this man. He's brilliant. He's a lawyer in his day job. He's an encyclopedia of information about Renaissance astrology too. I don't even know if he still does his day job. I imagine he's making enough as an astrologer that he doesn't need to, but he's got a great mind. Anyway, he taught me about this whole talismanic method of creating things. And what you do is you get the ingredients that are related to your talisman, the images that you're going to engrave, the materials that are made of the right materials, and you wait until all the stars are aligned properly. And you can use software to do this nowadays, but it used to be they had to look at their ephemeris, find out when Jupiter, like if they're doing a Jupiter talisman, when is Jupiter best aligned in the next couple of weeks or months or whatever. They find the best date. It's called an election. They find the best planetary election for their talisman. They weigh all the different forces, and they have ways of putting numbers on each planetary power based on whether it's afflicted, conjunct to the other planets, or if it's in its sign that's in its detriment, or in its fall, or peregrine, or all these different influences of where the planets are relative to the astrological signs and relative to one another and relative to the Earth. They all combine to form a very complicated way of weighting the powers of any given moment based on where the planets are. So in a very good election, your power of Jupiter might be plus 15. So it's 15 times as Jupiterian as it is on a normal Jupiter day. But if it's like negative 12, then you're screwed, and it's a bad idea to do a Jupiter talisman at that time. But basically what it does is this material thing, this object, you start engraving it or doing whatever it is you do to combine these ingredients at the moment when the election is most suited. And that is like, basically, it's like the natal chart of that object that you're making. It's like when a child is born, the second of its birth, its natal chart is formed, and you can tell its horoscope from then on based on that. Same thing with these talismans. At the time that you begin it, that's its birth. That's the chart that rules that talisman's existence all of its life. And that talisman is a snapshot of those forces, and it radiates those forces back out into the universe around it. So it continues to impact the universe as if that moment in time was caught in this little talisman. It's a solidification of your astrological forces, and it continues to radiate around it in a certain circumference and affect things for the bearer in a way that are influenced by these powers. It's very passive. Like I said, it receives and accepts the thing. And the thing is, the more I've studied astrological magic, the more I've learned that there's always a reason not to do magic. It's never a good time. And the more you learn about magic, or about astrological magic and timing and the impact of all these other planets, is that the reason our magic fails sometimes is because you just didn't take it all into account. At least you can get stuck in that idea that if only I had thought of everything, then certainly it would have worked, right? And of course, if you could think of everything would work every time. But the illusion of astrological magic is that if only everything was right, it would be perfect. In reality, astrological magic it proves that it's never good enough. Existence is never good enough to manifest what you want. This has been a continuing lesson in my life. I hate it. You can't get the ideal. You can't get perfectly what you want. The whole Platonic idea of this ideal thing can exist in the mind of God, but it can't actually materialize perfectly in the material world because everything here is just a little bit screwed up. That is basically what astrological magic teaches you. And I can't stand that. I get it. I deal with it. I accept it. I move on. But I don't like it. I would much rather work with the planetary forces and the intelligences and ask them and tell them and beg them and offer them money and bribes and candles and incense to do what I want than just sit there and wait for everything to be perfect, because the stars are never right. It's always the worst time to try to do something when you need to do it. So don't worry about it. So that's why our magical approach is completely different. We do this we're going to be doing this where we actually work with these archangels directly. We're going to have them direct the forces for us. We're not going to wait for it to be ready. We're not going to wait for Jupiter to get its butt all the way over into Cancer. We'll call on the archangel of Cancer and say, set the backdrop of the energies for Cancer here. And now we'll get Tzadkiel to bring in the powers of Jupiter. And now we're going to have the energies that are necessary for this fourth pinnacle of Jupiter in place. And we'll be able to approximate it by applying the forces of these archangels. Christopher Warnock calls this the bless the fuck out of it method. And basically what you do is instead of like conjuring it at just the right time when everything is naturally going for you and as good as it gets way, you just conjure these intelligences and you're like, force the forces of the forces you force into this forceful talisman to forcibly make it forceful for me. Right. And then they just do it. They bless the fuck out of it. And then you have a powerful talisman that works in the same way that a talisman would have worked if all the spirits had been aligned, at least in theory, if all the stars had been aligned, at least in theory. Whether it's my experience with this is that it's still kind of hit or miss, right? I mean, we'll get into sort of like how magic manifests in a minute, but the reality is nothing's ever perfect. it's hard to make it's hard to make anything happen, like whether you'd use magic or not. Magic makes it easier, a lot easier. It paves the way for everything, but we still have to do the work, and it's kind of a drag. But yeah, so basically when we conjure up this stuff and we try to materialize things, like take lottery magic, for example, right? If you want to win the lottery, we all try to, I don't know if you've tried it. I've tried to win the lottery with magic. I did not win the lottery with magic. Other times I did. I won like $6. I won $2. I got three numbers right. I missed the numbers by one on four numbers. I would have, it's just, you get really close, right? But the thing is we got to remember that we're not alone in this universe. This universe is manifesting the ideas and the materializations of every other magician who's trying to do this, right? So we're up against us mostly. But then not only that, there's also fate, right? There's the fates. Where's my picture of the fates? I got, here they are. The fates, they're out there weaving together all the different energies of creation. And we have things that we're assigned to do, like when we're born. The Saturn sphere, when we descend into the seven spheres, the Saturn sphere here gives us our fate, our destiny. When you look in Neil Gaiman's Endless, like they've got fate as one of the destiny, I guess his name is, because they all start with D. Destiny is one of the endless. It represents Saturn. It represents where all of everything that's supposed to happen to something in existence is assigned. These forces that we work with are, I don't know how fate works. I have theories. I think that because we live in ignorance of what's going to happen, we feel like we have free will and we think we have choices. But in reality, the future is going to happen, and it's going to happen the way it's going to happen, whether we want it to or not. However, I also believe that fate is worked out through our choices. Like, humans have to make choices, and that's how the fates weave their threads together. That's how we have experiences advance, is through our actions and our choices. So choices that we make in ignorance of the outcome are the method and function of fate manifesting itself in the world, right? That's sort of how I feel about all that. But we call on these spirits to actually do miraculous things, right? That's like the backdrop of how fate works, right? That's the backdrop. But we want things to be different, and we call on these spirits to change things, and they have the power to do that because they are the powers that change, that manifest these things in our lives. But they're doing this for everybody else, and everything has to work together in harmony. You're up against everybody else, but there's a whole universe at play, right? There's a whole world working to be manifest and materialized for reasons that are greater than just you and me. It's not all about us, and we have to be a little bit humble about this stuff. But the only way you know if you can have something or not is if you try to do it. If you don't ask the gods or the planets or the energies or the forces to do what you want them to do, you're never going to know whether you can have what you want or not. So my opinion, always try. The worst thing that you can be told is no. Okay. So let's talk about how magic actually materializes. When we conjure these spirits and we tell them to do stuff, they release these forces into our sphere. And these forces, like I touched on earlier, they come down into our sphere and they glom onto some aspect of our existence that is similar to them. And then they continue to manifest through that. They give us opportunities to materialize the things that we actually want to see happen, that we're asking them for. They get us the information to do things, but they don't do those things for you or on your behalf, right? They give you the information to make the right choices, to seize the things. Each of these spirits represent a gate of manifestation. The planets are the gates of materialization that apply its related imagery and qualities to what we experience. But it's a gate. A gate doesn't do anything. An intelligence knows things. It directs the forces for you, right? But once those forces are released into your sphere, it has to materialize around your framework of your life. You have to give it a path to materialize. If you want money and you have a side income, a side gig job, you can ask for a windfall, and the windfall will come in as blessings on your side job. Or if you have, if you want to have a lover, right, and you don't have a lover, doing magic to get a lover and then sitting there waiting for someone to text you is one way of doing things, but it's not going to provide you with as many opportunities as doing a ritual for a lover and then setting up a dating profile, right? And of course, would you have gotten a lover if you set up a dating profile anyway? Probably, but would it have been the one that you wanted? Not as likely, right? Because what these spirits do is they influence our realities. They influence things in our favor. They provide us with these blessings and boons and benefits. And that's the fulfillment of our fate because we ask for it, right? Our fate is manifested through our choices, and we choose whether to ask these spirits to help us or not. So you got to ask them for help. Always ask them for the outlandish thing, but expect them to provide an influence and materialize in ways that bring you coincidences that seem to provide what you want. That could very well be natural forces. And I go into a lot more detail of this in the workbook. I'm probably going to go ahead and move on, but I do want to keep talking about it. It just don't expect it to be like given to you. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So anyway, all right. So let's move on here. Materialization magic basics. Okay, so how do you actually get started doing this stuff? Basically, just like I said at the beginning of the class, the thing I recommend for people to do is set up their material world first, because it's a good way to practice. It's a good way to get to know how the powers manifest in your life. I just saw a squirrel jump like 8 feet from the ground up to the top of this fence. That was incredible. Sorry about that. I just said squirrel. Anyway, I'm not ADD. Maybe I am. So anyway, the way to actually practice this stuff and get started on it is to pick something that you want, identify its qualities that are most related to a planet, and pick the planet that is best suited for what you want. So if you want a new job, Jupiter might be the thing that you want. But if you want a new job in broadcasting, Mercury might be the thing you want. If you want a new job in the military, if you want a promotion, Mars might be the thing you want. Right. So you pick the planet that is most closely associated with the essence of your desired result. Keep it simple at first. Like you can work with multiple spirits. And that's the thing, is you can get as intricate and involved with this stuff as you want. If you want to be the fates weaving together the 7 forces and apply it to the 4 elemental kingdoms, you can do all that. But I don't know enough personally to do that really well. So I ask the intelligences to do it. The statements of intent is very important to phrase things the right way and to learn to let them do their jobs in ways that they are good at. They are much better at manifesting things than you are. They've been doing it for a lot longer. Definitely let them kind of drive as much as possible when you're starting out. But you can get more intricate as time goes on and weave the forces together as you want and work with Medimiel and Sadkiel in the same right, and be like, I need a Jupiter Mars talisman. Please give me a seal for that. And they get this image, and then you engrave it in the metal and you ask them to bless it and sell it to your client or whatever. Right. You can do that. It's more complicated. And you get the skill sets as you go along. But to start out with, I recommend people start with just the relationship. If you're interested in relationships, but start with Maslow's pyramid, the food, sex, shelter, clothing, security. Those are the things that you want to take care of first. And food is Venus, food is agriculture and all the gods of production, and the womb that has received the seed, the earth that is producing the food. Work with Venus for food if you're worrying about not having enough to live, or you don't like the quality of the food that you have available to you. Sex is also Venus. Jobs. So The best way to think about it, in my opinion, no, it's not the best way. But an easy way to remember what you're dealing with is you've got benefics and malefics. The benefics are Jupiter and Venus, and the malefics are Saturn and Mars. Saturn is the greater malefic, Mars is the lesser malefic. Venus is the lesser benefic, and Jupiter is the greater benefic. So you've got the good side and the bad side, and then everything else is sort of in the middle, or can go either way. If you look at the Kircher tree of life, you've got the three pillars: the pillar of severity, the pillar of mercy, and the pillar, the middle pillar. And basically, the pillar of severity has Saturn, Mars, and Mercury on it, and the pillar of mercy has Jupiter and Venus on it, and Hokmah, but Hokmah, who gives a crap? It's the whatever. Hokmah is like the dumbest sphere. It's the eighth sphere. It's I don't mean dumb. I just mean it's like it shouldn't be considered. It's beyond the seventh sphere. It's before things exist. It's the realm of fate. It's the fixed stars. It's the zodiac. It's the realm of where things are sort of in stasis, but they're fixed and they don't move. They're uncaring. They're cold. They're distant. The idea that they are like the lower spheres is simply ridiculous, and when you read the Corpus Hermeticum, it talks about how you get to the eighth sphere and you learn to hymn hymns of silence. And it's true, when you get through your initiations and you start getting to the eighth sphere, you learn how to do things quietly that change the world in a big way. And it's really cool. It's all these it's like a Siddha or Sidhu or whatever they call them in Hindu stuff. It's like these little magical acts that you can get, but it's ridiculous stuff. It's silly stuff. It's not really that impacting. It doesn't really change things. And I don't think the Hokmah deserves to be its own sphere. I like where it lies in the Hermetic traditions as the sphere of the fixed stars, and sort of it's this big deal when it comes to fate, but your human interaction with it is less personal than the seven volatile moving planets. They move across the sky through the planets. They're more like us. Once you get to the eighth sphere, it's nothing like us. They've never been here. They don't know what it's like, or if they've gone back up, they don't really care about what it's like on this side of things. The seven governors give a crap about us because they're involved. It's their job. The eighth sphere, not so much. The ninth sphere, it's all about what's on the other side. But that's not really what this is about. When we're trying to work with these spirits, pick the planet that represents most closely the thing that you want in your material life, and conjure that planet's archangel. Ask it to materialize the things that you want. Ask it if it's going to work for you. Ask it how it's going to do it, if you can, if you're good at scrying and getting information. If you're not, tell it to materialize things in ways that are so obvious that even you won't miss it. That's a phrase I literally use in all of my rituals. Make it so obvious even I can't miss it, because I'm slow on the uptake sometimes. Just wait and see what happens then. Usually you will see your results within 2 weeks. If 2 weeks go by and you don't see what you want, you can always do divination. I recommend doing divination anyway. You should definitely be doing divination for all your magic, because whatever, I don't do it myself. I recommend it like everybody else. But in real life, I just kind of do things and wait and see. But I mean, in theory, I should find out what I'm going to do before I do it, in case it's going to go wrong and hurt people. But I'm not as enlightened and compassionate as I like to pretend. But regardless, this is the basics of materialization magic. Pick a sphere, conjure the spirit, tell it what you want, wait a minute, and then let it go, and then wait and see what happens. And if it didn't work, 2 weeks later, do it again. So advanced materialization magic. So this is once you get to it's not quite as complicated as weaving in portions of Jupiter and Mars to create a specific custom talisman for a client, but it's sort of like medium complicated. It's definitely advanced though. This is a technique that I developed for my clients. I charged $1,200 for this when I first started doing it. It was great. I loved it. And I had like 2 clients, and it was incredible. But what we do is you take an idea that they want to manifest in this material world, and they're coming up with this idea here in the material world. So the first thing you do is you take this idea or some symbol of it, like this one guy had a shipping business. So we took the symbol of his shipping business up through the seven spheres, and we released the negativity that was related to the moon, all evil, lies, and deceit that were addressing that company when we started. We took it up to Mercury, and we asked for to release all bad business contracts and anything that had bad business or any bad business decisions that had been made based on false information. Took it to Venus, and we asked for all the lines of production that had been corrupted to be free of all the corruption, and so forth and so on through each of the seven spheres on the way up. And then we brought it all the way back down through the seven spheres. So if you're doing this on the planetary hour and the planetary day of these spirits, you're getting the clearest communications. Planetary magic, like for the hours, think of the hours and the days that they're ruling as being like the knob on a radio. The spirits are like a signal. They're giving out this radio signal. It's sharp and strong and clear. But if it's the wrong day or the wrong hour, you're going to get more static. There's more noise to signal. But in the planetary hour and the planetary day, the signal is coming through the most powerful, the most clear. There's the least amount of interference. So on a Jupiter hour of a Jupiter day, Jupiter's going to come through the Jupiter most. So if you're doing this advanced materialization magic where you raise things up through the seven spheres and then bring it back down, it's going to take 2 weeks to take it up. And then it's going to take about 5 weeks to bring it back down because you're doing it only on the days and only on the hours in the Chaldean order of the planets. And up through the spheres, it's every other day. Monday is the moon. Wednesday is Mercury. Friday is Venus. Sunday is the sun, right? And so forth and so on. Every other day goes up the sphere, up through the chain of manifestation. But on the way back down, you've got Saturn is on a Saturday, but Jupiter is on a Thursday. So you got to wait till Thursday. And then Mars is the following Tuesday. So it's not quite as long as you had to wait until Thursday, but it's still a bit of a wait. And then, to get to the rest of them, you have to wait until the Sunday and then Friday and then, so forth and so on. Anyway, it takes like 5 days or 5 weeks total to take something down through the spheres. So anyway, that's a more advanced technique. And I have never done this without it being incredibly successful. I have a friend that we went shooting. We do archery and we went to a shooting range and we went shooting. We came back here and we relaxed and we were like just chilling out. And he had done a sort of a mass kind of rite, Eucharistic rite for my wife and I previously, and I wanted to do some magic for him too. So I was like, hey, why don't we do rising through the seven spheres real quick? And just in one day, I didn't wait in the right amount of time or anything. Just in one day, I took out my conjuration box and I pulled up the archangels of each of the spheres and I made a brief oration to them. I started with an opening like the Zeus thing that is in the conjuration class. I did the opening and then I conjured each of the seven spheres up through the seven spheres. I conjured each of the archangels and just asked them to release that negative aspect of their spheres. And then I asked them to bless us all on the way back down. And it took probably about 20 minutes. It sounded silly. Like I didn't realize how repetitive it would be until you start to think that you're saying the same thing to each of the archangels on the way back down. Please bless us in the powers of your sphere. Please bless us in the powers of your sphere. And all you're doing is changing the names and a short description. And I didn't really think about that when I was thinking about what I could do off the cuff to show my friends some magic. But it's funny how like after that, his whole life, it just sort of transformed. He became, he's prominent in his spiritual community now. He's in a position of authority and leadership. He's been recognized and acclaimed for his skills and his communication abilities. He's published a book. He's making all these strides forward in his social and spiritual path. And his family life, he's cleaning out crap that he's had with his parents for years and years. This stuff is all going on after we did that one afternoon, and I don't, it's it's hard to tell what would have happened without it. But the level of change that taking something up through the seven spheres and bringing it back down again that you see is utterly transformational, and it can be scary as the transformation starts. I've seen people. I used to recommend rising through the seven spheres in 7 days. Like we would do it once every couple months. It was like doing lines of magic, right? And just total ADD kind of thing. And it was super fun, but it was terrible at the same time for people who'd never done magic. If you've never done magic and you just all of a sudden jump in and release all these powers in your sphere, it's crushing. It's the lightning struck tower, right? And in the Thoth deck, you can see that when the lightning struck tower is hit, it reveals the truth, and the eye that sees all can be seen, the true structure that was buried under the filth and stagnation of the bricks that were made out of mud and clay, all that crap falls off, and the true pyramid and the true power is revealed in all of its glory, right? And that's the lightning struck tower. Beautiful, beautiful metaphor, but fuck, it hurts. It hurts the whole time. You're falling. It's awful, right? And so these people would do these things and they would get all excited about it. And I was a lot younger, and these days I don't do that. I don't participate in that, because it turns out that trauma is a real thing, and it continues to hurt um, long after you would think it was fine, and you don't know what you're dealing with on the internet. So I don't do that for complete strangers anymore at all. Eventually I plan on doing that in retreats, somewhere safe where people can explore that kind of thing. And after I've gotten to know them a little bit and know that they don't have some horrific backstory that they tell like a joke, right? It's not something that I want to deal with personally, and also legally. Jason Miller pointed out to me that if my bank accounts weren't very clearly designated as separate between Rufus Opus and Josh Gadbois, that I might run into problems offering trauma therapy to people or causing psychological damages to people. So I try not to do that for legal and ethical reasons. So yeah, ethics. So anyway, working with the seven spheres to change things is like that's like taking control of your life, you know. But like I was just talking about, the initiation process is in my opinion the greatest part of planetary magic. So my bullet here is supreme wisdom, lay it on them, right? That's in all humility, I'm going to talk about something that I think is the most important part of occult practices and spirituality, and every reason that I want people to do this stuff, the reason I teach this stuff, the reason I try to make it accessible and I simplify it as much as possible, is because there is an ecstatic experience of the union with your God, or whatever you see God as. And this is ubiquitous, right? There's something that you experience that changes the way you see life. Okay, we don't know what Siddhartha saw when he was sitting under the tree, but what happened to him when he stood up was he was a different man. Okay, and he saw things differently, and we called him enlightened because of what we saw him doing after that. My opinion is that he had an experience where he saw what this material world is like compared to everything else, and it put it into perspective. And enlightenment is very much a perspective on things, an understanding of how things work. And after you've had a couple of experiences with the unification with the divine, this shocking moment of understanding that we are not real, we are temporary, we are part, we are not whole, but we are also whole the whole time. You know, that you can get there through drugs. Like I had an experience like that on acid. I've had similar experiences on mushroom. These are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not poo-pooing them at all. But what we can get with planetary magic is completely different. It's not really different. It's just more, it sticks with you. You know, like the problem with drug enlightenment is that eventually you sober up. You know, you get back to normal, your neurons get back to normal, and you're back to just your stiff self, and you can't figure out what's going on. But when you're working with these spirits every day, it's a different ball game altogether. You can tune into this universal consciousness whenever you feel like you need that refresher of a perspective on things. You still forget things. You're not like super enlightened forever. You're not like always on and always brilliant or whatever, but you have access to a higher power all the time. Everything that we experience is rising up out of a consciousness at the core of everything. This is what they call supreme wisdom. When I say supreme wisdom, it's not because I think it's great. It's because this is actually the idea of the doctrine of a unified Godhead that you experience on DMT and all that shit. It's actually it's something that is it's a real thing. It's not something I made up. They call it the supreme wisdom. That's its title. And it's just, they call it the supreme wisdom because there's nothing higher than that. And it's basically like what you get in the eighth sphere. It's this connection to everything. It's this unification with all things. It's this, it's a form of communicating your desires with the desires of the mind of God, the nous. That it's hard to explain. It's bidirectional. You do get to control the whole universe sometimes. Sometimes everything dances when you whistle. That's fucking amazing when that happens. When you're like looking at the tree and you're humming its song because you know the music that it's dancing to, and you change the rhythm a little bit and the tree changes its rhythm too. That's beautiful. That's something. It happens with clouds, it happens with birds, it happens with swarms of bugs, right? These things are all operating on the same electrical impulse that connects all of us. Everything that exists that has a cell has a core that's running on electricity. That's the same electricity. We're all part of that. We're part of this wired network that is connected all the time. That's why I've embraced Zeus as this massive thing. And the more I meditate on Zeus, the more I have these experiences and understandings of the universe as a manifestation of Zeus. My wife worships Hecate. Hecate is not a lightning bolt. Hecate is the world soul. Hecate is the liminal goddess that stands between all things. So when my wife has an experience with the unity of God, the unity of all things, her flavor of it goes through this whole Hecatean experience. She's explained it to me and described stuff to me that I understand as like the lightning flash, the shining bolt of Zeus. She understands it as the world soul operating and controlling the gateways between the manifest and the unmanifest. She experiences it as the fulcrum that is used as the lever that shifts the universe back and forth between one realm and the other through all the intermediary spirits. She experiences all that at the crossroads, at a holy crossroads in this, I don't know if it's astral or what, but she has this whole vision of it that's completely different than mine, that means the same thing to her. That unity experience changes everything about your understanding of reality. You can communicate with other people who've had that experience in ways that you can't communicate with people who haven't. It's, in my opinion, it's the key of being able to get past all the temporary crap that keeps us from getting along, that keeps us from being kind to one another. All right. And I have so many hopes for humanity. And I think it's experiences with that sameness of us all that will lead to more compassion. At least that's what I hope. That's why it's so important to me. The ways that you can use planetary magic to make your life better and to deal with your personal issues or concerns as things arise in your life, as dramas unfold, and your sister-in-law is gossiping about you, or your cousin is having problems, or you've got whatever, your boyfriend, girlfriend, so-and-so cheated, or whatever's going on. Somebody's gotten it's not, whatever the worst possible problem that you're having to face is. Identify the planet that most closely aligns with that and work with the archangel of that planet to cleanse that problem in your life, and you'll immediately start to see everything start to get better. These are like one-off, easy, low-hanging fruit things to fix about your sphere that will impact your life and help you be able to get that sense of calm in your life, so you can get to a point where you can start to meditate and connect to this universal experience and start to ascend through the heavens and ascend spiritually and become whatever version of enlightened you're going to become. You can't do that when you're worried about whether your partner's cheating on you with the neighbor kid. You can't do that. Well, if you're worried about getting fired, you can't do that while your boss is screaming at you for something that's not your fault. You can't focus on how we're all good, man, and it's all one thing when you've got a bunch of crap to deal with all the time, right? So when the crap comes up, take it to the planets that are most closely related to it. If you're having relationship problems, give it to Anael of Venus. Give it to Venus herself. Give it to the source of love. Let them heal it, right? If you've got trauma or damage, take it to the sun and let the heat melt that shit down and purify it, and don't not without a therapist, not without, do all this stuff more like healthfully. But these things that are going on in your life, address them with the planets that are most directly related to them. An actual plan, though, is actually to go up through the chain of manifestation and ask each of the archangels to initiate you. In the seven spheres, I teach that you can summon the archangel and read the Orphic hymn as a statement of intent. If you took the conjuration class, you've got all of the lessons that you need to do that. You can conjure the archangel of the planet using the seals and the symbols in the conjuration class. You can work with that archangel to heal you of any problems that are going on in your low-hanging fruit areas of your life today, right? Over time, you can practice this more advanced theory, this actual plan of initiation, moving up through the chain of manifestation. It takes 2 weeks. Every other day, you just ask the angel show up and ask the angel to do the things that are explained in the Orphic hymn, and you go on to the next one. You do this gently. You don't have to force it. You don't have to ask for any massive changes. You can even ask for them to do it gently along the way and to initiate you into the powers and to remind you how to use the forces that they represent. Ask them to reveal themselves to you in your life. This is the actual plan. It's moving up through the chain of manifestation to heal the parts of you that are damaged and to empower the parts of you that you need to create yourself, to create your experience, and to create your world, right? It makes you more aware and more able to interact with everything else. Once again, conjuring spirits, if you don't, I have instructions here, push the class. Take the class. I guess everybody here, you've all taken the class already, so you don't need to take it. I wanted to go over the format for the remaining classes. Basically, I'm just going to zip through this because we've got questions. The qualities of the planets from the 3 books of occult philosophy. If you want to read ahead, go ahead and start reading book 2 of the 3 books of occult philosophy. You'll learn a lot more than my classes are going to cover for sure. But the second book of occult philosophy is a great one. The third book is also great for kind of understanding how they manifest in the chain of manifestation. And anyway, both of those are where we're going to be getting a lot of the common correspondences. We'll be going over the colors, numbers, incenses, stones, social manifestations. I'm going to go over the columns in Liber 777 and the columns of Agrippa. There's an encyclopedia of magicians that Rankine has made available, and I don't have a copy of it. God damn it. But I need to get one of those. But anyway, you can get one of those also and learn a ton of stuff about the planets. But we'll just kind of go over a high level of what you need to get started doing the magic as soon as possible in each of these classes. I'll be telling you kind of like how the spirits manifested in my life, what you can expect. We'll cover each of the entities of the spheres, the gods, the intelligence. So we'll be working primarily with the intelligence and spirits from Agrippa's tables of the planets. They're the same spirits that I covered in the 7 Spheres book. But also, and probably more exciting, are the 4 spirits related to each of the 7 planets. And I listed those in the conjuration class, but I'll be talking more about those and the talismans that we use to work with them. Names and seals of the terrestrial spirits. I'm assuming that has something to do with the elemental stuff. I haven't developed yet. So hopefully not. I think actually what I was talking about there was like getting the names and seals of genius loci and the local spirits, because that's actually something I know about. All right, so we'll talk about the sorcerer's path. This was actually a friend of mine recommended this part of the class when he was asking me to put together these classes. Haha. So Yeah, the sorcerer's path. It's sort of like we'll talk about what we do as magicians as it relates to that sphere, like what to expect when you're doing the practical magic of each of the spheres and common indicators of those planets at work in your sphere, so that you can see, you can learn to see like, oh, I did that Jupiter right. Here's the manifestation of this. It's my boss telling me I did a great job on this over here. Do I want to work on this project over here? Or I have an idea for a new project. I need to follow up on that. Learning to recognize that that's a Jupiter result of your request is part of the class. And then the types of magic that you do with the sphere to get the mundane material things. Solid examples of using the sphere to fix a problem. Okay, so like goes back to anecdotes where we've actually used the different powers to solve things like I all right, so I want to be careful how I say it, but like I did the magic of Mars to heal someone who had been diagnosed with cancer, and then the follow-up diagnosis came back that it was a misdiagnosis the first time. So did it cure them of cancer? I don't know. I'm not going to say that. It's obviously not, right? I mean, that would be ridiculous. And if I could cure cancer, I'd be in the freaking hospitals charging the insurance companies to cure cancer. I can't do that. It doesn't work like that. But I did magic to get rid of cancer, and the results came back without cancer. So was it a successful magical rite? Yes. Did I personally cure the cancer? No, not going to say that, but it was a successful magical rite, and I'm happy I did it. Anyway, so that kind of thing we'll talk about. The devotional path is the other aspect I want to talk about, and this is more about connecting to the energies as they are softer, like the passive side of things, and sort of like meditations, prayers, what you can expect as you go through the transformational path of the moving up through the seven spheres and getting your initiations. As I study Hinduism, I'm learning more about chants and mantra. I'm beginning to think that there's some value in it, and I've been experimenting with the Greek gods the way Jason Miller has you chant Io Heka, Io Ho. I've been chanting some stuff from the Dervani manuscript about Zeus. It's just Zeus the head, Zeus the middle, Zeus the all in all. I say that over and over again, and I picture a lightning bolt generating the universe. And the experiences I have as a result of that are incredible. So I'll talk about chants and mantras. I'm going to try to come up with something like that for each of the planets specifically, that actually has something as relevant to it as the Jupiter one, but I'm not sure that I'll be able to do that necessarily. Hecate is obviously, Hecate, but Selene for the moon, for example, would be probably easy. So not too worried about that. Meditations around the spirits and the hymn of the day. It's just, I don't know about that. I've thought about writing hymns, but I don't know if I'm going to do that in real life. That's a lot of work. So, all right. So now back to questions. Before we, if you have questions, do get ready to ask them. I'm going to go through the ones that are here in the chat. So thanks for putting those together, everybody. All right. So let's see. Answered how to undo spells. Get the concept of planetary hours and how they're calculated. All the planets are moving at different speeds, and what makes them work stronger at those certain times. What makes the planets stronger in their planetary hours? It's really just, it's a designation. Somebody decided that that's how it was going to go. There's no real legitimate reason any of this stuff works. Unfortunately, it's a lot of it is based on theory, and we say so, and it seems to work. I personally think that if they would have said it worked in a different way, we would have a different set of correspondences, but they didn't. And traditionally, we learned it the way it is, and so they said that, and this goes back to I think it's the Chaldeans, because that's where we get the base 360 for 360 degrees, and that's where we ended up with 12 hours in the day and 12 hours at night. The reason that we have 24 for the number of hours has something to do with the number of how a circle is divided by 360. And you go through and you do all the math on this, and you end up with 12 hours in the day and 12 hours at night. And that's 24 hours, right? And when you apply the 7 planets to it, Strangely enough, when you start on a Monday and you say that that hour is associated with the moon, and they'd already associated the 7 days with the 7 planets. If you start at the first hour of the moon and you go according to the Chaldean order, the first hour of the next day is the next planetary day. So it just happens to line up that way. And it happens every day of every week. So like if you just follow the Chaldean order normally around the 12 hours of a day and 12 hours of a night for 24 hours, you end up on the 25th hour is the next day's hour automatically. And that's how it works. So because of that, because that synchronicity and that order of the universe was found to be true in the hours of the day, down to the very number of hours of the day, then therefore they figured that each hour would associate with the first hour of the day being associated with the planets. And anyway, that's how we ended up with what hour was associated with what day and what planet. And why is it better in those hours? I don't know. It just seems like it is. And that's been my experience consistently all across the board. I come from a very chaos magic background where I believe what you believe determines what you experience. But the fact is that when you do magic that comes out of the grimoires, it's more effective than the magic that came out of your butt. I don't know why. It's just how it is. And okay, whatever. So the closer I can get to wrapping my theories of the universe around these theories that most humans have had most of the time, most of the experiences that we've recorded in most of our history, if I can wrap my brain around a consistent thread that tracks 800 BC beliefs around Manoa to my latest experiences with AI, if I can fit all that together in a concept that expresses what humans have been trying to do this whole time in their own time and their own methods, I don't know. It's just it seems like that's sort of that's like the goal of all this stuff. Anyway, the thing about the planetary hours is that it's more consistent with what we were taught in our planetary systems, and I think it's more effective for us because it's carrying on a tradition that is part of our psyche and our human consciousness, and it's our consciousness that forms our experiences literally in our brain. It's our consciousness that makes sense of everything, and we're going to order it along the patterns that are consistently found throughout our existence. So planetary hours and planetary days lining up indicates that there's going to be some other coincidence that sure enough aligns with this planetary magic theory of how things come into being. All right, so let's see. King, let's see. Psychedelics can open the door to anything good or bad. Yes. Is there a particular version of 3 books of cult philosophy? I like Donald Tyson. He is my favorite because of the notes. I love the extensive notes in there. I love some of his commentary. I think he was completely wrong on a lot of it, but he was wrong about it in ways that even I could understand it. So it made me feel smart about myself. And at the same time, he was right enough about it for me to be able to figure out what he was wrong about and how he would have been right if he'd known something else that I don't think he knew, he would have been right. So it's like I could kind of build the right answer out of his wrong answers, even if they are wrong, and most of it's right. So it's like the only thing that was wrong is like the table of planets notes, and there's a couple other things that are obviously wrong, but everybody knows it now because it's common knowledge, but he didn't have access to that when he was doing the translation. So anyway, I like that one because I'm the most familiar with it, and I haven't read Eric Purdue's version, and I know that he fixes astrological mistakes in past traditions. I think that's great. But yeah, if it works better, then it's definitely the better version. I personally, what works, and if I don't have Donald Tyson's version, I use Joseph Peterson's version that's on esotericarchives.com. So yeah, whichever one works for you. The eighth sphere, I could talk about that and Bune probably in just a minute. Let's see. If you've done a planetary spell with a god spirit and choose to work them again, Should you just do a simple conversation? Yes. Yeah. So part of your initial conjuration of a spirit should be to ask them to come back to you again when you call them by their name and their seal. Leave a shorthand, get their phone number, get a cell phone number, get a text ability for them, right? Just have that shortcut to get back in touch with them again. It's going to be more effective after you've worked together longer. So first, you definitely want to do like as much of the ritual as you can. There's a short form in the conjuration class, I think. There's simplified versions of it, and over time you should make it less and less formal until you get to a point where you can talk to them because they're in the room with you, because they're in the room with you all the time anyway. But you've experienced it enough to have it be a real relationship and not just an imaginary thing where you're just faking it yourself, right? If you know it's real, it'll work for you. But if you have to be convinced still, it's better to have the rites and the rituals around it to ensure that you have that faith that it's going to be there, and that you have that relationship tangibly. You've built it verbally in the room, whether you have it spiritually or not. So that's the value of that extra parts of the words. Sitting or standing during the ritual, I sit. I got a beanbag chair off of Amazon just the other day. It's great. And I sit and I scry. The scrying mirror is like about chest height then. It's beautiful. It works for me. I can do my incense. I can do my candles. It's all within reach. And I can sit there for hours and it doesn't hurt my back or my butt. And that's great, because when I sat on the floor, it was terrible. And standing, I just feel awkward if I stand while I'm trying to talk to the spirits. It's like, I actually want to spend 10 or 15 minutes in their presence, basking in their energies and stuff, and like, ooh, experiencing them. And I don't want to be having my back hurt or like my foot be numb or whatever. I want to be comfortable. Also, when I was doing daily meditations, I need to get back to that, but my asana was often the quote unquote God form, which is just sitting there with your feet flat on the ground and your hands on your knees in a chair. And it's like one of the most comfortable ways to meditate for long periods of time. You tuck your pelvis a little bit, straighten up your spine, and you put a balloon on the top of your head in your mind. And you just kind of like let it go and connect to the all thing from the base of your spine all the way up to the top. And it's super simple. Anyway, but it's better to do magic that way. It's better to do a lot of things that way, in my opinion, with the idea that you're connecting to the all thing, because you become the axis mundi, and the rest of the universe just kind of spins around you, and according to the hymns and tunes that you want. Let's see. Does the moon need to be waxing? Waxing moons are important for manifesting things. You start on a new moon when you want new things. And it's just like planting seeds. If you're a farmer, you try to plant as close to the new moon as possible, and you get bigger crops. You plant as close to the new moon for manifesting things and materializing things. And for getting rid of things and doing ascension magic, you start at the full moon or right after the full moon. And so like, think of it as everything that's coming into being, you put in the waxing moon. Anything you're trying to eliminate, or like if you're doing initiation stuff, the waning moon is a great time, because you're trying to release the ties to the earth and connect to the spiritual forces above. You're trying to dissolve the bad parts of your material life and conjure down the good parts, so all that stuff. Let's see. Yeah, so follow the phases of the moon, materialize, but at the end of the day, don't worry about it. If the moon's out in the wrong phase, conjure the moon, conjure Gabriel, of the archangel of the moon, and be like, hey, look, the moon's in the wrong phase, but I really need to start this manifestation process right now. Can you backdate it? Can you put it back a couple of weeks for me? And that sort of seems like it works. I feel like it's cheating too much to have a lot of faith in it. But if I could learn how to do that consistently, I definitely would change all time and just start over again and have everything be perfect for everyone, not just me. Everybody would just, but I haven't gotten there yet. Let's see. Anyway, so that's the moon stuff. The other questions about Bune and the eighth sphere. Let me jump on the eighth sphere first, because like I started to talk about that earlier. I don't know if you still want more information, but basically it's the experience of so if you read the the corpus hermeticum, if after a person dies, you ascend through each of the 7 spheres and you release something. And then in the 8th sphere, you learn the silent hymns of the 9th. And the silent hymns are the weaving of fate. It's the sound of the loom of Lachesis and Clothos and Atropos, right? It's the slice of her scissors. It's not even that. It's just the thrum or the hum of things coming into being and stopping. It's for me, my experience when I try to put it into words is it's about creation. It's about the union of desire and manifestation of that desire. And it goes back to after chaos, the first things to emerge were night and Gaia and Eros and Erebus, or I think it was Erebus, necessity, right? Eros emerged and Gaia formed Uranus because she had to have sex, right? And that emergence of desire created the manifestation, the union of sky and earth so that we could have the Titans form and the golden age of Kronos the king and his overthrow from Zeus, and everything that came ever since. All of that is necessary, right? Because of the union of desire. As soon as desire manifested, it had to be created. The process that we experience here is the outer edges of this giant fractal that has a source somewhere else that we're still connected to, but we're the outer edges of it. It's a lightning bolt in extension, light in extension, conx on pox. We are light in extension. We're the lightning bolt shooting through the things that are still alive, right? While they're alive, before they pass on. We're part of that. We get to be that conscious awareness while this flesh is here, right? And as we're skipping through, we're creating things. We're making ripples that form existences and experiences for other people who may or may not be as aware as we are, as we're creating our world, and they're experiencing it, and they're riding on our coattail, they're surfing in our wake, and that's great, and that's fine, and that's fun, and that's the process of creation that comes from our union with our desire, and finding out what our desire is part of what the great work is all about. And that's the part that I'm still working on. And when people come to me for consultations and stuff, they're like, I want to know what I can do. Like I get a lot of my course members in my consultations, and I'm like, dude, I'm as bad at this as you are. I don't know, right? We have all the power of the universe, but what are we going to do with it? Everything is a lot of work when you think about it. And it's like, how much do I want to do this? And that's the hard part. So anyway, that's the 8th sphere. When I try to put that into words, that's what I got out of that. Bune, on the other hand, is something I'd love to talk about. So Bune is awesome. I have I have a frame of his seal in black and white that I printed off years ago that I keep with me in a shadow box. I have his seal in about 4 or 5 different places around me right now. He's in his own spirit pot downstairs. I work with him on my conjure box. He's never far from hand. He is my constant friend and companion. His experiences with me have been so he's a Duke of Goetia, and I started working with him because I'm Taurus and I'm into the Venus. I was all into Venus, and in Goetia you see planetary magic reflected through the ranks of the Goetic spirits, and the Duke rank is ruled by Venus, and their seals should be engraved in copper. So all of my Bune seals are engraved in copper, and Bune rules over, according to the Lemegeton. Bune manifests riches for it says wealth, riches for a man, eloquence, and reveals causes flames to appear on sepulchers. Flames on sepulchers. So that was the third thing he does, and I interpret that as like his necromantic aspects of what he can do. And he seems to be like a spirit that can be worked with to materialize the dead, for lack of a better word, right? So if you're doing seances, or you're trying to, like, if a client needs help tracking down the will of their dead father or whatever. I know this is like, sounds like crazy shit, but if you ever get into doing magic for a living, you have some very strange experiences, and they are textbook, like, occult things. Like, it's ridiculous how how absolutely stereotypical things can be, when it comes down to it. Anyway, the I anyway, it's yeah, Bune is very useful for pretty much everything that you want to do as a hermetic magician. His ability to help you with eloquence, like I say a lot, but when you look at how, when I'm actually channeling my writing skills and doing it well, I can be eloquent as fuck. I'm not bragging. I'm just observing my experiences and the impact I have on other people with my words. It can be really incredible at times, and I attribute that to my experiences with Bune. And Bune knows that I like to write, and I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, and he has an affinity to me because I have that writer's proclivity, right? That urge to write, and he has an urge to make people eloquent. And of course, I'm greedy and I want to make riches, so I'm all about that. In my experiences with him, though, I did, like, the first time I conjured him, I tried to win the lottery and I failed. And I got mad at him, so I put his and so when I was doing it, I was learning hoodoo, and I learned that you nail the so I had heard about nailing the seal to your doorstep or your door edge. So I nailed my lottery tickets with Bune's seal on it to the doorpost of my house. I don't know why I thought that would be a good idea, but I did. And then I didn't win the lottery. And so I took his seal and I put it in the oven on a because I didn't have a hot metal box like it says in the Lemegeton you're supposed to use. So I put it in the oven at 200 degrees and I baked his seal until it started to turn brown. And I took it out and I was like, now you'll work for me. Ha ha. Right. Like some kind of idiot. And it was totally stupid. Later on, I learned that iron is something that, like, if you read fairy lore, iron is anathema to spirits of certain types. The reason Mars is associated with iron is because Mars is used to force spirits to do things. The iron of Mars forces spirits to obey because iron can harm spirits or hurts them, or it's some types of spirits anyway. And it's used against the fairies, right? It's effective. You bury it at the corners of your house to keep the fae away, right? And we know iron has electromagnetic properties. We could pretend like spirits are electromagnetic in some way if we want to, but regardless, iron has some impact on spirits. So anyway, I don't remember exactly why I started talking about that. The other Bune. Yeah. So the other aspect of Bune that I wanted to talk about. Oh, right. So I had nailed his thing to the thing, and the iron was probably what stopped him from manifesting for me the results I was looking for. It certainly didn't help. And baking his seal didn't do anything. He didn't care. It wasn't like he feels pain. All it did was make it harder for things to manifest for him. Because I was so mad at him, I didn't ask him for anything. It was kind of dumb. The next time I worked with him, it was much better. He's very responsive to candles. I learned to offer him things like a shot of whiskey. He likes a stick of incense, a shot of whiskey, and a tea light candle. I work with all my spirits that way now. It's incredibly useful. Some like wine, some like gin, some don't like drinking at all. That's fine. But all my spirits get tea light candles and incense sticks, and I learned that from working with Bune. He's super effective at getting you small amounts of money. Like if you need anything up to around $400 to $500, he's really good at getting you that, like, out of the blue. Especially if you have revenue streams, it's great if you need some quick money. I've got the story I've told. I don't know if you've heard it. You probably have, but if you haven't, I conjured Bune. My now ex-wife hadn't paid the electric bill in like 6 or 8 months, and my electric was going to be turned off um, the day after Christmas. And I found this out like 4 weeks before Christmas, and I couldn't come up with the money, and they wouldn't take a payment plan. And nobody had the money, and we were going to have our power turned off, and there was nothing I could do about that. And the day after Christmas, our power was going to shut off, or 2 days after, something like that. So I asked Bune to come up with the money, and I showed him the turn off notice, and I said I need 4,000, whatever it was, $4,500 or $4,200 by this date, the day that they were going to turn off the bill. And I had to get that money by then, or I was going to have my power turned off. I had 2 babies and I had a wife, and I was already working like 60 hours a week, 2 jobs. And she was supposed to be managing the money, and I like an idiot, was not doing anything to check. And it turned out that she had screwed me out of that money. It was awful. And so anyway, I did the magic spell, and I burned 9 tea light candles to Bune. And I said to him in desperation, my heart was pounding. I was scared poopless. And I think that is something else. Emotion fuels your spells. Don't do magic when you're mad or crazy or deeply in love or whatever, unless you really want it to manifest and you are ready to deal with it being as erratic as your strong emotions are in that moment. Being completely dead inside is no way to do magic either. The more you speak with your heart, the better. The more you put your emotions into things. But if you're really mad or super in love and obsessed with someone, it's a terrible time to do magic. Desperate magic is always bad magic, and my experience with Bune was no different. I got my house caught on fire the day after Christmas. I had just gotten my kids all these presents. I don't know where I'd gotten the money from. Oh, I think I had like $300 left, and it wasn't enough to pay the electric bill. So I just spent it all on the kids. I was like, fuck it, and I got them all this stuff from Walmart and the dollar store, and it was plastic crap, and the day after Christmas, my house catches on fire. And what happened was that there was this flare out from my water tank that caught a pile of garbage that I had next to it on fire. And it wasn't garbage. It was like my baby blanket from when I was a child. It was all my stuff that my mom had sent me from when she had downsized her house. And anyway, it all caught on fire when my water heater flared out.